The moment you start walking more, your body begins repairing damage you didn't even know was accumulating. And the mechanism behind it has nothing to do with fitness. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share for others to benefit. Walking is the most underestimated biological tool available to the human body. Not because it burns the most calories, or because it builds the most muscle, or because it produces the most dramatic visible transformation in the shortest period of time, but because it activates a set of healing processes, cellular, hormonal, neurological, and structural, that the human body was literally designed to require, and that the modern sedentary lifestyle has systematically removed. The consequence of that removal is not just reduced fitness. It is accelerated biological deterioration across nearly every system the body runs on. Chronic inflammation builds without the regulatory mechanism that movement provides. Lymphatic waste accumulates without the mechanical pump that walking supplies. Neural pathways weaken without the locomotion stimulus that kept them active. Connective tissue stiffens and degrades without the repetitive loading that signals ongoing maintenance and repair. When people begin walking more consistently, not as a structured training program, but simply as a regular, daily physical practice, the body does not experience this as exercise in the conventional sense. It experiences it as a return to the conditions under which human biology was built to function. And the healing response that follows is not subtle. The inflammation that is silently aging you underneath most of the chronic health conditions that accumulate with age: cardiovascular disease, metabolic dysfunction, joint degeneration, cognitive decline. There is a common driver that researchers now identify as one of the central mechanisms of biological aging itself. It is called chronic low-grade inflammation. Unlike the acute inflammation that occurs in response to injury or infection, which is purposeful, targeted, and self-resolving, chronic low-grade inflammation is a persistent, systemic state in which the immune system maintains a low but constant level of inflammatory signaling throughout the body. It damages blood vessel walls over time. It interferes with insulin signaling. It degrades the integrity of joint tissue. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and contributes to the neuroinflammation associated with depression and cognitive decline. Sedentary behavior is one of its primary drivers. Not because sitting is inherently dangerous, but because the absence of regular movement removes one of the body's primary mechanisms for resolving inflammatory load: the contraction of skeletal muscle. When muscle tissue contracts rhythmically during walking, it releases a class of signaling proteins called myokines. These molecules have direct anti-inflammatory effects on surrounding and distant tissue. They communicate with the immune system, the liver, the brain, and adipose tissue, modulating the inflammatory environment throughout the body in ways that no pharmaceutical intervention has been able to fully replicate. Interleukin-6, one of the most studied myokines, is released in significant quantities during sustained walking and has been shown to suppress the inflammatory cytokines most directly associated with chronic disease progression. This means that every consistent walk is doing something that goes far beyond cardiovascular conditioning or caloric expenditure. It is actively suppressing a biological process that, left unmanaged, accelerates the deterioration of nearly every system in the body. The people who walk regularly are not just maintaining fitness. They are running a daily anti-inflammatory intervention that most of them have no idea they are performing: the lymphatic system and the waste. Your body cannot clear alone. There is a system in the human body that receives almost no attention in mainstream health and fitness conversation. despite being directly responsible for one of the most critical functions in biological maintenance, the clearance of cellular waste, metabolic byproducts, and immune debris from the body's tissues. The lymphatic system is a network of vessels that runs alongside the cardiovascular system, collecting fluid and waste from the spaces between cells and transporting it toward lymph nodes for filtration and eventual elimination. Unlike the cardiovascular system, which has the heart as a dedicated pump to drive circulation, the lymphatic system has no pump. It relies entirely on the mechanical compression generated by surrounding muscle contractions and body movement to move lymphatic fluid through its vessels. In a sedentary body, lymphatic flow slows dramatically. Waste products accumulate in tissue. Immune cells are not circulated efficiently to where they are needed. The fluid balance between cells becomes impaired. The result is a diffuse biological sluggishness, a reduced capacity for tissue repair, immune response, and cellular detoxification that contributes to the general feeling of heaviness, brain fog, and reduced physical resilience that many sedentary individuals experience as their baseline normal. What walking does to the brain. The healing that walking initiates is not confined to the body below the neck. Some of its most significant effects occur in the brain, and they involve structural changes that researchers have only begun to fully understand in the last 2 decades. The hippocampus is the brain region most directly involved in memory formation, spatial navigation, and the regulation of the stress response. It is also one of the only regions in the adult brain where neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons, occurs. And it is one of the regions most vulnerable to the effects of chronic stress, poor sleep, and sedentary behavior. Hippocampal volume reduction is associated with depression, anxiety disorders, age-related cognitive decline, and increased vulnerability to neurodegenerative disease. Regular aerobic walking has been shown in multiple studies to increase hippocampal volume. The mechanism involves a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which is upregulated significantly during sustained, low to moderate intensity movement. BDNF functions as a kind of biological fertilizer for neural tissue. It supports the survival of existing neurons, promotes the growth of new neural connections, and enhances the brain's capacity for learning, adaptation, and stress regulation. The psychiatric and neurological implications of this are substantial. Consistent walking produces BDNF increases, comparable in some studies to the effects of antidepressant medication. Not as a replacement for clinical treatment where it is needed, but as a measurable biological intervention on the neurochemical environment that governs mood, resilience, and cognitive function. The anxiety reduction that many people associate with regular walking is not simply the result of getting out of the house or having time to think. It is a neurochemical event: BDNF production, endorphin release, cortisol modulation, and amygdala downregulation, occurring in real time in the brain tissue of everyone who walks consistently and long enough to sustain mild aerobic effort. Conclusion: walking more will not solve every health challenge. It is not a substitute for clinical care where it is genuinely needed, and it does not override the effects of poor nutrition, chronic sleep deprivation, or unmanaged stress in isolation. But it does something that almost nothing else in the available toolkit of human health behavior can claim. It simultaneously addresses inflammation, lymphatic function, neurological health, joint maintenance, metabolic regulation, and hormonal balance through a single, accessible, daily practice that requires no equipment, no expertise, and no financial cost. The body was built to walk, not occasionally, not as a warm-up to something more serious, but daily, consistently, as a fundamental condition of biological function. The healing that begins when walking becomes a regular part of life is not the body responding to exercise. It is the body returning to the conditions it was designed to operate within. That shift, from viewing walking as something too simple to matter, to understanding it as one of the most physiologically complete healing practices available, is the shift that changes how people age, how their bodies feel, and how their health trajectory unfolds over the decades ahead. Start where you are. Walk today. Walk tomorrow. And understand that every step is not just movement. It is maintenance, repair, and renewal, happening in real time, in every system your body depends on.